Out of the Body by Robert A. Monroe. And I did it again. Okay. Step 19, Statistical Classification. The first step in making some kind of sense of the mass raw data was set up standards for measurements and analysis. After several attempts, it became apparent that only a few of the typical yardsticks could be applied. Therefore, assumptions and premises were made to permit identification in the sorting process. The conclusions brought forth are only as valid as the premises on which they are based. The following are the primary assumptions. 1. Vertical qualities of the experimenter. Implied here is not the experimenter's status in society, but rather the assessment of basic characteristics of the individual involved. However sincere the experimenter may be, credibility must lie within the fundamental personality. In my experiments, I am willing to undergo an additional psychiatric, psychological, and physical examination in the interest of the development of additional related data. This alone may be sufficient to establish a satisfactory degree of intellectual acceptance. 2 similarities are analogous. Simply stated, this means that the observed condition and action taken has relatively the same standards as those applied in its here now physical counterpart. Regardless of any apparent incompatibility with the present knowledge and concepts of mankind, the reality of the experience is accessible if it equals, approximates, or is sufficiently similar to the conditions of the perception and interpretation normal to the waking physical state. 3. Perception and interpretation. The accuracy of these is assumed to be correct within the limitations of the same error-producing factors as are found in normal waking physical state. These factors are contingent upon environmental training and experience, intellectual quotient, and emotional makeup. It must be assumed that sensory inputs in the second state, although obviously of a different nature, are subject to the same reasoning and rational interpretive process. The objective analysis of structure and shape identification, of qualification, classification, and operation occur in equal relationship to the experience and training of the individual, just as in the normal physical waking state. Further, in perceiving data beyond such experience and training, the mind in the second state acts under strong command to identify. And acting on this unequivocal command, it will identify within the limits of the experience rather than accept the existence or fact of the unknown. In other words, you must assume that the experimenter is reporting truthfully. You must assume that what takes place while in the second body is real. If it meets the conditions of reality held in the physical, waking world, you must assume that the mind works similarly in the second body, using different means of seeing, hearing, and feeling, as well as a few new senses. You must assume that the mind refuses to accept an unknown element in the second state, even to the point of incorrect identification. You must assume that the same qualities of human error and perception and interpretation are present. Given these premises, the sorting and classification of some 589 experiments over a period of 12 years becomes somewhat easier. Here are some further conclusions. In dreams, the reasoning intellectual process is absent. Consciousness, as the term is understood, is not operative. Either participation in events is at the purely reactive or uncontrollable level, and there is complete non-participation as an immobile observer, unable to take deliberate action. Perception is limited to one sense, or at most two. No immediate and analytical ability is present or utilized. Associative misidentification occurs with all perception and is retained as such in the conscious memory. The second state is the antithesis of dreaming, just as is the waking state. I can't read. Recognition of I am consciousness is present. The mind attempts to handle perception in precisely the same manner as does during full physical consciousness. Decisions are made and actions are taken based upon perception and reasoning. Verification of perception can be achieved by deliberate and systematic repeated action. Participation is as fundamental as it is in the waking physical state. Sensory input is not limited to one or two sources. Emotional patterns are present to a greater extent than in the physical consciousness, but can be directed and controlled to some degree. If any experimental experience did not contain a majority of the conditions listed in the second state category, it was considered a dream. The remaining experiences were again classified. The environment was analyzed next in the search for causes. If there wasn't something to create the condition, it was very obscure, as illustrated in the chart. Physical conditions in successful experiments. Percent of total. Day, percent of total. Condition percent. Day 42.2, night 57.8. Warm 96.2. Cold 3.8. Humidity not discernible effect. No discernible effect. Barometric pressure, no discernible effect. Prone 100%. Upright not applicable, I guess. North, south, head to north 62%, east to west 19%, position unknown, moon in planetary position 18%, No discernible relationship. So position unknown was not characterized. Okay. Successful results were obtained principally under conditions of warmth, lying prone, and a north-south position. There is no noticeable effect from sunlight, humidity, pressure changes, physical body location, or the moon's gravitational force. More sophisticated environmental studies are possible, but none have been made to date. Evaluation of the physiological state was somewhat easier, as most notes contain references to it. Physical state in successful experiments. Percent total condition presented. Normal health 78.4%. Minor debilitations 21.2%. Illness or energy 0.4%. Tired 46.5%. Rested 18.8%. Intermediate 34.7%. Before eating 17.5%. After eating 35.5%. Intermediate 47.0. I don't know why I put percents there. Okay, I guess it is percents. The possible catalytic factor drugs are their agents 12.4%. This indicates that physical illness, so often present in spontaneous disassociation into the second body, is not a significant point. The most frequent state is a slight tired condition, not immediately after eating, in which medical or chemical stimulants and depressants do not play a vital part. Psychological state at start of successful experiment. Percent of total condition present. Calm 3.2%, moody 8.9%, preoccupied 64%, anticipating 11.9%, restless 3.7%, emotional stimulated 9%, intellectually stimulated 6.5%, agitated 7%, frightened 2.7%, unknown 30%. In classification of psychological state, if the single human laboratory is to be a starting point, a basic calmness seems to be a prerequisite, with some overtones of emotion and introspection. It must be pointed out that under the frightened category are various degrees of trepidation, most of which are noted in the early stages of the experimentation. The balance prior to experiments which produced a violent or disturbing experience, the feeling of anticipation, in varying degree, often occurred simultaneously with calm. Following is the analysis of control elements. Origination of condition in successful experiments. Percent total. Willfully induced 40.2%. Spontaneous 14.9%. Intermediate 44.9%. Deliberate induction experiments percent of total attempts. Successful result 58.7%. Sleep producing 13.6% and effective 27.7%. This is your methods used. Successful results. Sleep producing ineffective. It looks like percentiles again. In induction sound tape, success results 17.1%, sleep producing 5.7, and effective 4.5. Countdown relaxation 24%, sleep producing 4.5%, 12, and effective 12.9%. Recall technique 3.7, sleep producing successful results 3.7, sleep producing 1.7, and effective 4.7. Composite 13.9% for successful results, sleep producing 1.6, and effective 5.7. Symptoms evident in successful experiments, percent of total condition represent. Air has sound 45%, physical catalepsy 11.4%, vibration effect 3.2%, feeling of warmth 66.9%, miscellaneous. In the spontaneous classification, it must be noted that the experiments became willful upon action in the second state condition, i.e., the condition began to manifest itself during a state of normal relaxation. I took advantage of the opportunity. Intermediate were cases where only the tendency was evident and the development of the condition was exercised with deliberate intent. Successful result includes those cases where two or more of the symptoms were generated, with the result of that part or all of the second body was brought into evidence. Sleep producing includes those during which I simply fell asleep. Ineffective refers to instances in which no discernible result was obtained and none of the symptoms were induced. Under methods used, the effectiveness of the various techniques attempted is illustrated. The techniques are described elsewhere and represent an evolution based upon simple trial and error testing procedures. The induction sound tape, for example, proved quite effective, but had inherent limitations and imposed restrictions upon self-determination. It was for this reason that the countdown technique was most frequently utilized. Symptoms must be examined for the evolutionary view. Physical catalepsy was observed only in early stages. This is also true with the vibration effect, which noticeably evolved into feeling of warmth and only occasionally had perceived during the middle or later stages. The air hiss sound appeared early in the experimentation and continued intermediately. In each successful experiment, observational data sources were separated into the following categories. Means of perception, percent of total condition present. Seeing 67.2, hearing 82.7, touch 69.8, taste 0.7, smell 0.3, movement 94.2, other 73.0. It must be pointed out that the sensory input relationships listed above translated into an approximation of each of the categories. This does not imply that identical non-physical nerve system equivalents were used in perception. At the present stage, there is no evidence to prove or disprove a similar structure of the second state, nor is there any apparent explanation of the low position of the taste and smell senses on the scale, other than that both depend upon physical contact with matter itself or particles of matter. However, the sense of touch would seem to have the same limitations, yet appears as a prime input source. The answer may be that the latter is operating on some form of radiation perception level, or in the case of the individual, is more developed than the taste and smell patterns. Movement is considered a classification because it connotes action rather than passivity, and seems to be truly a sensory source above and beyond the traditional five senses, much as the balancing mechanisms and the physical body transmits signals to the brain independent of supporting or conflicting impulses from other senses. In the physical body, this mechanism may be based upon application of gravitational and inertial forces. This may hold true in the second state as well. Under the other classifications are types that have no physical counterpart. The means of perception in the second state are beyond the scope of present knowledge and theory. The most sound conjecture is that all perception in the second state is achieved by means of some force in the electromagnetic spectrum, by direct magnetic fields, either received or induced, or through some force or field yet to be identified, rather than by counterparts of the physical mechanisms. Only by empirical study and wide multiple source testing could this be determined. Analysis and classification. One of the key points in the second state phenomena is how actively and accurately the mind sorts out perceived data and acts rationally upon such information. The evidence of identification was scaled in the following manner: percent of experiments when characteristic was present, configuration, shape, or form. 20. Then he has all these lists here. Why don't we break this down? The percent of experiments when characteristics was present, configuration, shape, or form. And it says 20.6, 40.4. Structure components. I don't know what structure components. I'm not sure. I'll just skip that part. You can just look at it and pause the video if you can see it. But it goes through this whole thing: configuration, shape or form, then the structure or components, animate, intelligent, subhuman, artifact, unknown, inanimate, abstract, artifact, evident, action, obscured, precipitation, and analogous. It can be inferred from this survey that the majority of activities in the second body had to do with humanoid type intelligences operating in familiar or similar backgrounds and using identifiable objects. However, the trend is reversed when examination is made of the event itself or action involved. Here is illustrated that much is beyond my experience and knowledge. Relevancy to the second state. Now, see, he has that breakdown there, so it's better. He forgot to put the breakdown there for some reason of the two categories. Anyways. In terms of perceived data, the greatest weakness was found in attempt to apply known physical, scientific, historical, social structures to the experience while in the second state. The table will demonstrate the problem. The percents of total successful experiments different or not. Then it says the physical science perception. Identical, applicable, unknown. Time, so this is identical is 45%, applicable 49%, unknown 5.7%. Matter or structure, 38.4%. It was identical, applicable is 41%, 19.8% unknown. Conservation of energy, 52.6%, identical. 18.2% applicable and 29.2%. Field force interaction, and we'll just go to the list here of the physical science precepts, because I don't want to read all these percentages. Anyways, and I imagine you don't want to hear it. So, conservation of energy. It broke down wave mechanics, gravity, action and reaction, radiation, current social concepts, community, organization, family unit, male-female relationship, a learning process, maturity, aging, genetic association, a symbiotic relationship, cultural drives, basic motivations, historical or religions, technical developments, political history, and theological premises. So these are the categories that he broke down. So for him and his the people that he did any experiments on. The above sorting process must be considered in the light of developing techniques and experience in the second state. The category of time refers to the sense of passage of time while in the second body, and is unrelated to the physical time measurement. Lapse time in the physical state is not presented, as it is not germane to the actuality of the second state. Under the identical column are a list of events in which there was awareness of the passage of time, and under different and non-applicable are listed those events in which lapse of time appear different, either accelerated, retarded, or non-existent. Unknown shows where the data was not available from the notes. The remaining scientific concepts refer only to conditions, actions, and environments while in the second body, and do not relate to the local experiments and visits to strictly here and now people and places. The latter followed all natural laws, although this did not necessarily affect the second body experiments. The analysis of the social concepts demonstrates the perplexing problem of adjusting to the second state environment with such vast differences in prospect, thought, action, and emotion become extremely difficult to comprehend. The incongruities faced are described elsewhere. In the analysis of historical religious concepts, the events listed under identical and the three subcategories are principalities are principally the result of excursions into the here and now. Under the second column, virtually all experiences appear to be in areas other than percent time space. The third column represents uninterrupted, uninterpreted, or unreported data. Through the developing patterns of the experiments, changes in perception took place readily, as indicated in the previous chapter. Early perception resulted chiefly from the experiments represented by the data in the first column, while the second and third column figures represent probing into the middle and latter stages. It is evident that only by applying new concepts can these latter results be registered to the known areas. Classifications by similarities and analogies brought about the emergence of another pattern of localities. Percent of experiments when characteristic was present. And then it goes through there's locality 1, locality 2, locality 3, and the breakdown is just a distribution of successful experiment. Looks like highest percentage of success was locality 2. Time, locality 1 and 3, 85 to 88. So the best. Okay, so they perceived that matters of, but did not perceive time at all in locale 2. Matter structure. It seems, if I'm looking at this right, well, matter structure 75%, 0.4 or 0.8, respectively, locale 1 and 3. 52.5 for locale 2. I'm kind of just reading it the way it stands out. Conservation of energy. And locale 1 is 58.3. Locale 2 is 33.9. And locale 3 was 91.9. Gravity. It seems like it's most well in locale 3. Action reaction. Most relevant, and once again locale 3, then locale 1, and then locale 2. Community organization. Did I skip something here? Yeah, I did. Radiation was most noticeable in locale 2 at 91.9%. Then locale 1 at 73.5%, and then locale 3 at 42%. If I didn't lose. Community organization, non-applicable locale 1, whereas it looks to me, if we look at both of those, it's locale 1 and 3, we're pretty much about the same at about 30%. Learning process, highest in locale 1. Genetic association, highest percent was in locale 3, and then locale 1 non-applicable to locale 2. Symbiotic relationships, highest percentage was in locale 3 at 33.9%, then locale 2 at 12.8%, non-applicable locale 2, if I said things right. Cultural drives, highest in locale 1, non-applicable locale 2, and 0.8 in locale 3. Basic motivations, highest in locale 3 at 71%, then 43.1% in locale 1, non-applicable locale 2. Technical development, highest percentage would be locale 1 at 68.2%, non-applicable locale 2, and at 24.2% in locale 3. Political history, not applicable on locale 2 and 3, but at 68.3% in locale 1. Theological premises, not applicable at locale 2 and 3, but 13.7% in locale 1. A further condition which did not involve movement was left unclassified, as it fell into none of the above locales. This is described in Chapter 12. Locale 1 conforms strictly to the physical material world in all respects. Locale 2 is many-faceted, but evidence only a few of the patterns common in locale 1. It is an area of energy fields, both familiar and strange, where there is no gravity, but significantly several of the more vital laws of physics do apply socially, historically, and philosophically. There is very little parallel to locale 1. Locale 2 possesses inscrutable questions. It has almost identical characteristics as locale 1, except for several definite departures which are inexplicable. These show up under technical development, political history, and theological premises. Only extended exploration in the second body phenomena by an expanded research group can bring about truly comparative studies of these areas. All that is needed is motivation. Chapter 20, inconclusive. All of these years, I still do not know how and why this departure from the norm took place. On the surface, there is no easily determined cause. Medical or mental sciences offer no certain questions, which has made me alternately resentful, sad, and thankful. Resentful in that my faith in the scope and breadth of modern scientific achievement has been badly shaken. Sad because full-scale development of directly related knowledge is not likely to come in my physical lifetime. Thankful for a few scientists of our time who are brave enough to consider objectively concepts which may negate years of studies as well as long ingrained religious and ethical beliefs. Therefore, if no current scientific theory fits without an inordinate amount of pushing, pulling, and twisting and squeezing, it seems reasonable to propound a premise that does seem to work. After all, one can prove that man is nothing more than a few gallons of tainted water. What? After all, one can prove that man is nothing more than a few gallons of tainted water. Only extreme pressure is needed to fit the phenomena to the theory. The following premise, unacceptable as it may be to our present state of enlightenment, deserves consideration. No other offers more explanations and leaves less unanswered. This is not to say that it is necessarily valid. Only future events can determine its validity. Conversely, there is no known theory to prove it false. The basis of the premise is certainly not original here, but its application is. Question: what happens to the laboratory animal once the experiment is completed? In a universe populated with sentient beings of great variety, and the planetary environment's germinating life follows a typical pattern. The prime requirement is a diffusing and restraining shield that envelops the entire planet. When this shield has formed through a normal evolution of planet matter, the fundamental requirement for animate life is present. The shield is composed of gases and liquids of sufficient density to 1. Deflect, filter, and or convert radiation from the parent and nearby stars to a point of tolerance needed for animated life, and to maintain internally and generated planetary heat at an average level within the limits required for the biochemical process. Once developed, the shield permits only filtered light and reduced radiation to reach the surface of the planet. Visibility is limited strictly to nearby objects on the surface, and vertically to less than 1/10 the diameter of the planetary body. No distant stars, moons, or other planets can be seen. At most, the indistinct glow of the parent sun may be seen occasionally, moving from horizon to horizon as the planet rotates. In this environment, animate life, physical life, generates and evolves in a broadening cycle, where no such shield has developed and remained for a significant period. No animate physical life is present, where the shield has decayed and drained off into space. Life has deteriorated and died unless intellectual knowledge is sufficient to develop and install an artificial environment. The accepted premise then is that all planetary bodies fall into two categories, shielded and unshielded. On the translucently shielded planets, animate physical life may evolve. Unshielded stay barren, devoid of anything but inorganic matter. Only in very rare instances are there any deviations from this rule. Evolving sentient life in these conditions becomes aware of and utilizes first those natural forces directly perceived. Such forces in the order of perception and application are 1. Psionic, creative thought, energy, biochemical, nuclear, and gravitational. If I say the right, psionic. This may be supposed to be psionic. That's what it is. Electromagnetism is employed sparingly and remains more as a byproduct of other force applications, much like the smoke from a useful fire. The primary needs of these evolving life forms are met through development of the psi force, phi force, whatever it is. The first of these needs, communications, is an automatic birthright. Transmission and reception of information from individual to individual, or from one group to another knows no time spatiality. Through experience and education, proficiency is gained in other applications of psi. I guess it would be psi or pi, right? Psi, such as movement and conversion of matter, direction and control of lesser species, and communication and association with those in the realms of non-physical matter. Very technical error. I wonder if he wrote this. As the intelligent life forms develop into societies and civilization, the understanding and knowledge of the remaining available forces come quite normally. Typically, they are the result of individuals and the society's desire to be relieved of the tedium of constant and continuous use of the psi force. Thus, mechanical means are created to produce body nourishment, to master and control the planetary environment, to transport matter, to multiply motion, and even to modulate and amplify the psi force. And through the I might never say that right. Sorry about this. Okay.
Alphabet, so make sure to stay tuned to the channel. In English, two different ways of pronouncing it: psi or psi with a psi.
Psi. I don't know why I kept saying pi. Psi. Why can't I think of psi? Pi. Okay, where was having all this crap when I screwed it all up? Okay. The primary needs of these evolving life forms are to meet through development of psi force. First of these needs, communication, is the automatic birthright. Okay, we write that. As the intelligent life form develops into society and civilization, understanding and knowledge of the remaining available force comes quite naturally. So through the experience and education, proficiency is gained through the application of psi, such as movement and conversion of matter, direction, and control of lesser species. Communication is an association with those in the realms of non-physical matter. As the intelligent life form develop into societies and civilizations, understanding and knowledge of the remaining available forces come quite naturally. Typically, they are the result of individuals and society's desire to relieve. Okay, we read all that. Through the non-material matter perceptiveness of psi, the remaining forces are quickly adapted and harnessed to these needs. It is probable that at this stage, society achieves its first rational contact with other societies beyond the confines of its native planet, and with inhabitants of non-physical worlds. With the final step of maturity, the social organization is merged into the infinitely larger whole of intergalactic society. It is no coincidence that incontrovertible knowledge of the relationship of the totality to the Creator is the major product of this union. Gone immediately are misdirected fantasies and conjectures. The standards under which intelligent life may evolve and expand are woven inextricably into the rules or laws of energy and applied with equal rigor. And in the distant past, many of these social organizations had become aware of low-order psi force emanations from the outer rim of the obscure galaxy. At first, this phenomena evoked only minor interest, both qualitatively and quantitatively. It seemed to be no more than sub-intelligent animal transmission. However, the idle technician happened to process the raw incoming psi noise through the random sorter of the mild curiosity. To his surprise, infrequent flashes of applied psi appeared on the counter. Intrigued by the oddity, the psi probe was made of the area. As suspected, the birth of a new society was unfolding. Excited by the discovery of such an unusual event, the standard communication for new societies was transmitted. Strangely, no reply was received. Successive transmissions brought the same result. Here indeed was a rarity. The ecological team was dispatched to investigate physically this anomaly. The researchers discovered the source to be the third planet in the Class 10 star system. As they orbited the planet itself, measurements and observation indicated that it did not follow the norm of propagation of intelligent life. The gaseous planetary envelopes did not possess the usual unbroken high filtration characteristics. This evidently permitted unusual large amounts of radiation to reach the surface, even to the point where the sun was clearly visible from the surface itself, as well as distant planets and stars when viewed from the shadowed side. Further, due to high rotational speed and other factors, a magnetic field of great intensity pervaded the entire planet. This, coupled with the unusual radiation element, appeared to exert profound influences upon the infant society. At close range, the psi noise became virtually unbearable. Without equipment for shielding or sorting, it became impossible for a group to surface on the planet itself. The psi impression was that of raw, unchanneled irrationality, uncontrolled and non-objective. Yet visual observation showed the beginnings of social clusters, matter artifacts, and conquest of the environment. Luckily, one member of the visiting group had worked extensively in the art of personal psi shielding. It was he who offered the established physical contact on the planet itself. This was done while the others waited patiently in a shelter on the planet's barren and brittle satellite. The visit itself proved to be inadequate. The inadequacy of his training under certain conditions. The investigator returned a short time later in a state of mental exhaustion. He had, however, been able to make contact at several points around the surface. It was true. A new society was in the making, but under unimaginable restraints. There was no knowledge, understanding, and use of psi force whatsoever. When psi communication was attempted, the inhabitants either fled in panic or prostrated themselves, and emanated strong psychic reactions to the effect that they were in the presence of the Creator. Paradoxically, careful psi probes found occasional glimmerings of the universal law in the minds of these individuals, which conclusively proved that the seed had truly been sown, that this was intended to develop into a social structure. according to the plan, whatever the environment. With this knowledge, the research team returned to their own society to ponder the problem. In later periods, other better equipped investigators visited and observed this struggling intelligent life from time to time. All visits were performed within the rules which applied to the infant society, so that no direct support was given to that would instigate dominance of one culture over another. And frequently intelligent applications of psi were found at the individual level, and this was encouraged still. In spite of all the precautions, it was ascertained that actual visits only reinforced the myths and legends that had sprung up as a result of previous contacts. It was the exception that the objective response was obtained from an individual via psi probe. None of these responses extended to common practice. In recent periods, the situation has altered significantly. Routine psi monitoring plus referential advice from non-matter intelligences show that the society in question has surprisingly entered the nuclear age while still in the biochemical. Applications of nuclear force inevitably led to gravitics, which presumes historically the early prospect of interstellar travel. Without complete understanding of the psi force fields, contact with other social organizations by the new non-psi society could be disastrous. If interstellar physical travel is achieved, such contacts are a certainty. With this prospect in view, research groups have increased their efforts at contact without a serious effect upon the dynamics of the new society. It is difficult in that the same obstacles are present. The continuing interpretation of divinity orientation persists. Some who are contacted by psi probes still lose their ability to reason and are isolated as sufferers of some disease. Any lasting psi communication pattern is usually labeled as unreality or dream, a term used by society to identify uncoordinated psi activity during recharging periods, similar to that found among infants and normal social cultures. Most frustrating are attempts to communicate with the intellectual leaders. Without exception, these have been unsuccessful. Research suggests this to be the result of total concentration and the study of matter, historical rejection of all psi force phenomena, inability to comprehend any communication other than that perceived by the sensors of light, sound, vibrations of the gaseous envelope, and variations of electromagnetic radiation mechanically generated and translated. The only minimal success has been with individuals without inhibitory scientific training, with little to unlearned or no prestige loss to be suffered. Productive exchange of rational thought has been accomplished in several of these relatively uneducated inhabitants. Unfortunately, the interpretation given the data received by such untrained minds is often highly distorted. Further, the guiding authorities of the young society dismiss the testimony and claims of such people by reason of their ignorance. The work still continues. High levels of psi force radiation equipment is being employed in the hope of breaking through to the society member during their walking active state. Any individual who possesses some degree of intellect coupled with objective curiosity are being taught, sometimes painfully, the basic of psi force techniques. Others are being taken out of their environment temporarily, either as dense particle matter or as psi entities, to be tested and examined for clues to the solution of the problem. No direct action will be taken. This is in the keeping of the rules of preservation as they apply to all lesser social organizations. It is a fact many times proved that such self-classifications are consistently lost when contact is made. It's getting a little wild here, isn't it? The details from this hypothesis may be wrong, the motivations different, but the basis may be not all that far from reality. We may in fact be no more than interesting laboratory animals to them, useful in various experiments, but not much more. If such communication and or experimentation was and is now being attempted, it could account for much that is left unanswered in our human history. Certainly it would widely cut across past and present theological beliefs, as events ascribed to God and his assistants in whatever form would assume a more prosaic status. The life sciences, especially those relating to the mind, personality, and neurological functions, would have to undergo a major overhauling. Both mental and physical diseases would perhaps be understood with exact knowledge and replacing the vague assumptions now prevalent. Most adaptable would be the physical sciences. Here, experimentation and extrapolation would be a relatively simple matter, with new information and theories built upon fairly solid foundations. On a personal level, the hypothesis described above may offer a reasonable answer to much of my own experience. A point-by-point re-examination would be necessary to bring into focus the proper relationship in each circumstance. Like the philosopher, the psychiatrist, and others who have spent many years of experimentation, training, and development along the particular concept vector, I am loath to change course still again. Yet the following experiences could not be totally ignored. They occur in the earlier period of experimentation, and are taken almost verbatim from the notes. Well, that's pretty interesting. I need to take a break. This one's you think it was hard hearing me read? Anybody was able to get through this reading? My hats off to you. That was a bitch of an hour. I got a little bit more here. I'll just get it out of the way. 9960 night. I was laying in a north-south position when I suddenly felt bathed in and transfixed by a very powerful beam. It seemed to come from the north, about 30 degrees above the horizon. I was completely powerless, with no will of my own, and felt as if I were in the presence of a very strong force and personal contact with it. It had intelligence of a form beyond my comprehension. It came directly down the beam into my head and seemed to be searching every memory of my mind. I was truly frightened because I was powerless due to anything about this intrusion. This intelligence force entered my head just above the forehead and offered no calming thoughts or words. It didn't seem to be aware of any of my feelings or emotions. It was looking impersonally, hurriedly, and definitely for something specific in my mind. After a while, perhaps only a moment, it left and I reintegrated, arose and shaken, and went outside for some fresh air. 9/16/60 night. Same impersonal probing, the same power from the same angle. However, this time I received a firm impression that I was inextricably bound by loyalty to this intelligence force, always had been, and that I had a job to perform here on Earth. The job was not necessarily to my liking, but I was assigned to it. The impression was that I was manning a pumping station, and that it was a dirty, ordinary job, but it was mine, and I was stuck with it. Nothing, absolutely nothing, could alter the situation. I got the impression of huge pipes, so ancient they were covered with undergrowth and rust. Something like oil was passing through them, but it was much higher in energy than oil, and virtually needed and valued elsewhere. Oh, Luce, are we talking about the beginnings of his assumption not to this material planet? This has been going on for eons of time. And there were other force groups here taking out the same material on some highly competitive basis. The material was convertible at some distance point and civilization for something very valuable to entities far above my ability to understand. Again, the intelligence force moved out and away quickly, and the visitation ended. I got up after a bit, feeling depressed, and went into the bathroom in our house and actually felt I should wash my hands after working, although my hands were clean. 9:30:60 at night. Same pattern as 9:16. Again, there was the feeling of being the pump station attendant. The approach of the entity down the beam. The search of my mind. This time, even to see what specifically controlled my breathing apparatus. I seemed to understand that the entity was looking for some substance that might permit breathing in Earth atmosphere. A picture was shown in my mind of a pouch, possibly 2 or 3 inches and 1 inch thick, hung on a belt at the waist, with the statement, "This is how we are breathing now." This gave me courage to try truly to communicate. I mentally orally also asked who they were and received an answer that I could not translate or understand. Then I felt them beginning to leave. I asked for some actual indication that they had been there, but was rewarded only with partial amusement. Then they seemed to soar up into the sky while I called after them, pleading. Then I was sure that their mentality and intelligence were far beyond my understanding. It is an impersonal, cold intelligence that with none of the emotions of love and compassion which we respect so much. Yet this may be the omnipotence we call God. Visits such as these in mankind's past could well have been the basis for all of our religious beliefs. Our knowledge today could provide no better answers than we could 1,000 years past. By this time, it was getting light, and I sat down and cried great deeps of sobs as I have never cried before, because then I knew without any qualification or future hope of change that the God of my childhood, of the church, and of religion throughout the world was not as we worshipped him to be, and that for the rest of my life I would suffer the loss of this illusion. Are we then just leftover laboratory rats, or perhaps the experiment is still in process? That's the end of chapter 20. And that was probably the best part of the whole damn book for me, right there. Is that I'm glad I persevered. The last 2 pages. Yeah.
You're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind.
does not change.